order. Order. Angela Crawley to move the motion.
Thank you, Ms Dorries. I beg to move that this House considers employment support allowance and personal independence payments. It is a pleasure to serve under your chairship, Ms Dorries, and can I firstly say and wish all my constituents a happy St Andrew's Day. It is a privilege to be able to bring to the House for consideration the difficulties of many of my constituents and the people across the UK who have experience of trying to access support when they need it most through either employment support allowance or personal independence payments. Since becoming an MP, a large percentage of my constituency casework that I have dealt with, or my staff have dealt with, has been as a result of ESA and PIP issues. Due to the very nature of the benefit they are trying to access, these people are vulnerable. Many are experiencing serious illness for the first time in their lives and are facing a huge process of adjustment. This is hugely stressful, and this process is hugely stressful to the individuals, often feeling dehumanised and part of a process. The assessment procedure only serves to make things worse. Of the ESA and PIP cases that my office has dealt with, many have been complaints about the assessment process, and I will discuss one particular case in detail today. These assessments are often inhumane, needlessly stressful and unfair to claimants. Many other cases have required intervention on an unsuccessful personal independence payment claim, the vast majority which have been overturned at appeal stage. My constituency is sadly not the anomaly when it comes to these appeals figures. The latest statistics on appeals against PIP decisions show that 65% of appeal decisions were found to be in favour of the claimant. Not only does that highlight a deeply flawed system, but it shows that clearly that a number of people who are subjected to these highly stressful, often prolonged, protracted processes to get the support that they need, ultimately they are entitled to that support. 65% as a statistic of appeals overturned evidences that, and unless you can tell me statistics to the contrary, I'm going to assume that your system is not working. This suggests that the system needs to be radically reformed. The high appeal and overturn rate is unacceptable and unsuccessful in the government's part if what you're trying to do is drive down the number of illegitimate claimants, particularly when it impacts so negatively on the claimants that require these supports the most. Now, in my constituent's case, Donna, and Ms Dorries, if you will indulge me, I have the permission of my constituent to raise this issue, and they've asked me to do so in order to illustrate the impact that the benefit system had on their lives and to highlight the serious inequality faced by one of my constituents. Donna, who lives in Carluke, is a mother of 2 children. She has a supportive husband. She established a cafe called the Hope Cafe, which is a mental health charity. She's an advocate and a champion for supporting those with mental health problems. And I wish to commend Donna on her bravery, because she opened up to me so fully about her experiences that she had had with the Department of Work and Pensions. She has given me permission to share her story in full, because she hopes that it will illuminate the effect of malpractice and ultimately the effect that the assessments had on her life. Donna became seriously ill with severe depression and anxiety 10 months ago. She told me her mental illness made her believe her 2 young children, aged 8 and 10, would be better off without her in their life. She told me that her mental illness made her believe that she was useless and worthless, that she had no skills worth sharing with the world, and it made her think her close friends and family were ashamed of her for being weak. This is the mindset of someone in the grip of depression, incredibly difficult to break out of. Months later, she is thankfully recovering, and as her background is in this working in the field of mental health, she is keen to use her personal story to highlight the flaws in the benefits system and hopefully make the process for others the same and improved process. Donna went through the applications process both for personal independence payment and employment support allowance, which she found extremely harrowing in her own words. She first got in contact with my office to ask whether we could intervene and to support her, as she was required to attend both an ESA and a personal independence capability assessment. Donna, being logical and of course thinking that this would be an end within itself, asked if she could endure one assessment. Now, we are aware that this is not how this process works. Instead, Donna underwent an employment support work capability assessment and was asked back for a further personal independence assessment, and endured on both occasions to go through the lengthy assessment procedures. Because these are classed as two separate benefits and the assessments are carried out by two separate providers, she found both assessments incredibly difficult. She told me the questions she was asked made her relive the worst days of her life, and she felt that if she had not got the award, it would have been overwhelming, and at a point made her want to give up. Let me make the point clear. People who are already experiencing severe depression are already feeling worthless. Being rejected for financial support gives concrete evidence to what they believe to be the fact in their minds. For many people, this is the last straw. Donna told me she was not surprised that as a result, the suicide rates that she deals with every day are increasing. Donna told me her illness not only affected her, but it affected her whole family. However, she has been lucky that she has great support in her family and in her friends. Many others are not so lucky. For many people, without family support, where would they be? At the point when the rejection of the benefit system, who are they supposed to turn to? Donna's case highlights the fact that no consideration is given to the detrimental effect of this system on the already overwhelmed mental state of a person going through this assessment process. The reason that they are in this place in the first place is often for circumstances beyond their own control, and consideration must be given to each individual applicant and their circumstances. The recent film, I, Daniel Blake, by Ken Loach, both highlights the hard-hitting, honest and gritty reality and highlights the brutality of this government's policies. Donna was also brought up in the fact that the assumptions are made about claimants based on the observations of the healthcare professionals. She asked for a copy of her medical assessment report and was disgusted that the comments were noted about her appearance, her personal grooming, and whether they are tired or sweating. The comments were as follows: looks tired, looks thin, underweight, clothing loose, dark circles around eyes, unkept, untidy, unwell, troubled, sweating, pale, facial expression showed no emotion but tearful, restless, fidgety, coping with some apparent anxiety, seemed agitated, poor rapport, poor eye contact, withdrawn, thoughts of self-harm identified, no delusion, no obsessive ideas, unable to complete 5 rounds of serial sevens, unable to calculate correct when asked to calculate sums, unable to spell world backwards, unable to remember the 3 objects first time, had insights into their illness. Can I ask the Minister at this point, is this the kind of system that you set out to achieve? Is this a system that offers fairness, dignity and respect? And where, ultimately, is the humanity in that process? While many of these factors may be indicative of illness, many are circumstantial and subjective to the particular illness which you may or may not be assessing. For example, how would Donna's entitlement have been affected if she'd been immaculately dressed, or if she'd been having a good day, or did not exhibit some of the behaviours outlined within this prescriptive list? It has taken Donna 10 months to feel better. For 7 of those months, she's been awarded personal independence payment, and for the past 4 months, she's been receiving employment support allowance. Access to these benefits has been vital to her recovery. Donna wishes to return to work when she can, and she can manage her own health. She knows her own limitations. And yet, at this stage, due to her recovery, she faces the prospect of losing those benefits and sustaining her family at this already difficult time. If the support is removed too soon, while she is at a vital stage in her recovery, which could mean pushing her back to full-time work, she is all too aware that she could end up right back at the beginning again. Just like physical illnesses, mental illnesses take a long time to heal. There is no consideration for this in this process. Donna suggested a phased return to work would be helpful to her health, whereby people who, like she knows only too well herself as a professional in this area, recovering from depression, could still claim benefit and return to work slowly to build up her strength. Permitted work was explained to Donna, but as in her professional experience and talking to others she knows only too well, as soon as a claimant lets the Department of Work and Pensions know that they were able to work for a few hours, they are ultimately called for reassessment and asked to go back to work full-time. In her own case, Donna told me she would like to do a few hours a week volunteering to get herself back on her feet, but even voluntary work applies to this criteria, and there is no middle ground. Ms Dorries, Donna's case illustrates that the work capability assessment is not fit for purpose. Sadly, it chimes with the calls from mental health organisations across the country, including Citizens Advice, Disability Benefits Consortium, Mind and the Scottish Association for Mental Health, who have highlighted the fact that a tick-box method of work capability assessment fails to identify a claimant suffering and debilitating mental health problems, and it certainly fails to take their needs into consideration. Similar figures I mentioned earlier in relation to personal independence payments. The latest figures show 59% of the initial ESA decisions were overturned at appeals stage. The Government had one small concession on ESA in scrapping the retaining of chronically ill and disabled claimants. One small part of a system now relies on the common sense over bureaucracy. However, this is simply fixing one part of an altogether broken system. Although exemptions from repeated assessments for chronically and long-term ill claimants is welcome, it is extremely disappointing that the Department of Work and Pensions Secretary has not considered this for PIP claimants. Madam Chair, I hope the Minister will take heed of the problems I have brought up in relation to the work capability assessment and consider the effects this process can have on the mental well-being of claimants. I respect the hard-working staff who work for the Department of Work and Pensions, who ultimately are asked to administer this Government's policy. My constituents and people up and down the UK deserve a social security system designed to offer people the dignity, respect and fairness that they deserve. It's time that the Government stepped up to its responsibility. We are all citizens, we are all human and we all deserve respect. Madam Chair, and can I just say, because I'm sure that the Minister will come to this, when personal underpayments responsibility is devolved to Scotland, we are looking to design a system, and as the Minister will be aware, this takes time to do so, to get that system right, because ultimately these are the most vulnerable in society and they deserve a social security system that gives them fairness, dignity and respect, and I'm sure that we can all agree on that. Thank you.
Is that this House has considered employment and support allowance and personal independence payments. I call Mr Shannon.
Thank you, Ms Dorries.
You're on the list, Mr Shannon. Did you put in to speak?
I did indeed, absolutely. I'm more than happy to be called. I was just surprised to be called right away.
First on the list today.
No,
I know
appreciate
it's unusual.
That. So, the first shall be last and the last shall be first. So wherever you're called, it's always good to be called. And thank you very much for that. It's always a pleasure. I actually thought that the honourable gentleman was going to participate, so I was looking towards him, but no doubt he will participate at some stage. First of all, can I thank the Honourable Lady for Lanark and Hamilton East for very well setting the scene. We're back again to discuss this matter in this hall, and Ms Dorries, it'd be remiss of me not to give a Northern Ireland perspective to where we are. I also appreciate very much having the Minister in her place, and certainly all of us in this House appreciate the Minister's response to us. So what we say today will be examples of where, in my own opinion, of where the system's falling down. And I have to highlight those issues because they're issues that I myself and my staff take on every day of the week, and they're real key issues. Because what we see, Madam Ms Dorries, is this: we see people with angst, with anxiety, with all the issues of stress that are across the table from us, and we just say, how can we help these people and do it better? So I'm going to perhaps maybe try and say some of those things today. I've recently spoken on the changes to ESA work-related activity group and what that means for people. And I have to say again, with great respect, that the biggest issue is that the government needs to understand the difference between ill and unable to work. And if you want to know something, really, that's it. In a nutshell of this debate, the interpretation that the government's department have and what it means to be ill, and those people who sit across the table from me every day and tell me they can't work, and the Honourable Lady in her introduction, she referred to people being pasty, being sweaty, being anxious. Those are the things that I see every day of the week, and my staff do as well. So that's the issue. Just in this last month, I've had in my office a former Sister of a Ward. We've had a former construction business owner, a social worker, all of whom are now on ESA. Let's be quite clear. Not for 1 second do I believe that these people are choosing not to work out of laziness. And who would want to go from earning £500 a week down to 75? I mean, would you? No, you wouldn't. And that's what these people are now in direct contact with. The inference from the government in this whole policy is insulting, if I can say this with respect. More importantly, it's based on a false premise that cannot be allowed to stand. And I have to challenge that in this House, respectively and kindly, and to the Minister as well and to government directly. I always, and members will know this, I don't criticise. I don't feel that that's necessarily what I do, but I need to highlight what the issues are and in a very nice way ask for genuine compassion and understanding. The rationale seems to apply to PIP applicants as well. PIP is for the help you need for work. Apparently, the PIP assessment is intended to provide a more holistic assessment of the impact of a health condition on an individual's ability to participate in everyday's life. It covers sensory impairments, development needs, cognitive impairments and mental conditions, as well as physical disabilities as well. So within those 5 categories, you've got everything medically, physically, health-wise that there can be. It looks at the extent to which the individual is capable of undertaking various activities. For some of the activities, a person can score points to help meet the threshold for PIP if they can only undertake that activity by using an aid or an appliance. This could include such things as artificial limbs, colostomy bags, walking sticks, non-specialist aids such as electric tin openers and long-handled sponges. These are the helps and aids. I want to highlight 2 cases, if I can, stories, and one of them is a young lady who has ulcerative colitis. She's a young girl of mine, because I've known her, and my age is such that I can probably remember the day she was born, and that's the fact of it. And I've got to know her very well over the years due to her diagnosis with this unseen disease and how has it affected her and other people in my constituency. She worked in the civil service but was medically retired before 30, because they could no longer facilitate her working there. The government employer could not allow for her ability to work one day and not the next, as her illness dictated. And this is understandable. And I understand the reasons why government and civil service had to take a decision to say, look, we're going to have to terminate your employment. But that's where the problem starts. What I cannot understand is how they expect someone else to employ her when they let her go. So there should be an understanding, Ms. Norris, of why this lady is no longer able to work and why our employer, the civil service, government employed, had to let her go. And why do we find ourselves in this position where this young lady is conflicted with this? And that's the question that PIPs now ask her. Well, what job can you do? Where can we find you somewhere? Well, you know something. Let's be honest, that wee lassie would love to work if only she had the opportunity, but can't because of her disability. She's on an ESA and is dealing with the stress of these proposed changes. And never, ever, Ms. Doyes, underestimate the impact of the stress of this process. I hope I'm illustrating it in as strong a way as I can, because I see this all the time. She also rang to make an appointment for her PIP form to be filled in, or filled out, and how will she be assessed? That's the question I'm asking. Will they take the high rate that she currently gets away from her? She's on high rate DLA, deservedly so, by the way, deservedly so. Government ministers would say, no, the experience we've had so far in this office, in my office, is raising fear in our minds, in the minds of our constituents. I see that all the time. She has not improved one iota since her last DLA application. If anything, I would suggest that that young lady is worse, and yet there is real concern that PIP's changes will not help her. The stress of this, then, makes her even more ill. It's a vicious cycle that is repeated over and over again, and while PIPs is for someone who needs help during the night for hygienic purposes, for safety issues, the problem is this has not been translated into the new proposals. So, Minister, whenever the response comes, and I genuinely hold you as a Minister in the highest of esteem, we need to understand how this system works and how it can help the people that we're here today to make a plea, and it is a plea on behalf of, so we can take away the stress and the hassle. On the 11th of March, the announcement came out under the number of points awarded in the PIP assessment would be half for aids and appliances in relation to dressing and undressing and managing toilet needs activities. Why would you reduce the points for things that are needed? I can't understand that. And as a result, 290,000 claimants would no longer receive the daily living component, and a further 80,000 would receive the standard rather than enhanced daily living component. Budget 2016 estimated additional savings of £1.3 billion a year by 2019-2020. And this is great, but where does it leave my constituent who needs help during the night? Sorry.
It's an equal amount of time. Thank you.
I didn't realise that I wouldn't have been. I'll try to go into my Northern Ireland speed, which will probably be very, very fast. I'll do the stats. Budget 2016 estimated additional savings of £1.3 billion a year by 1920. But she does need this help. She needs her sheets changed at night. She needs often replaced entirely. Who needs someone to come in and take care of her during her bad periods? This is what her DLA paid for. A care to help her. And the question is, will PIP do the same? The answer should certainly be yes. But the point system is not set up for illnesses like ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. If you go to an ulcerative colitis or Crohn's UK website, you will see a link to a PDF, and here's the point I want to try and make, offering help and advice for sufferers regarding PIPs. The PDF form is 70 pages long. This is how complex the system is and how much help that these people need to fill out the application. If this does not put off someone who is seriously ill, I don't know what would. If this is what is intended by government with the welfare reform, make it so complex and intrinsic that many people will give up and live in substandard conditions rather than get the help that they need to live with their illnesses. So we need to be concerned, Mr. Doris, of people retreating inwardly and their lack of confidence in the problems that come. And I'm very conscious, Mr. Doris, that you've given me a time to try and keep to, and just two more paragraphs to try and do very quickly. I certainly hope not. I wholeheartedly believe that this new system is already failing people. I had a doctor, and this is my last comment, I had a doctor on the phone to say that his patient's decision was made without the assessor taking the time to request any information about the patient from the surgery. The doctor said, and I quote, he says, "Jim, if he doesn't get this help, he will have to go to a nursing home at 46 years of age. The care packages that Health Trust put in place are not sufficient to handle people not being able to privately pay for the additional support they require." So for this reason, Ms Doris, on their behalf, and I ask again most sincerely, most kindly and humbly, please look at this benefit. Please remember why it was set up, and please understand that for many this is the difference between having support to live and simply being able to exist. Don't continue to push these ill people, many of whom suffer from mental health problems due to the stress and strain of long-term illness. In this House, we are called as MPs to protect and help the vulnerable, and this is not what this new ESA and PIP system does. Thank you.
Mr Shannon. Mr Tomlinson.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, which seems almost a daily occurrence this week with the Bill Committee that I'm also serving on. And I pay tribute to the Honourable Member for Lanark and Hamilton East. This is an important debate. It's a topic that regularly comes up, particularly here in Westminster Hall, and shows the importance of Westminster Hall. And we are very fortunate that we have a Minister who's very engaged, very proactive at listening, particularly where the system isn't quite working as it is intended to, and acting and working with experienced charities, policymakers and all the sort to bring together, because what we all want, regardless of which side of the House we're from, is to have a fair system that supports the most vulnerable in society. It's also a pleasure to follow the Honourable Member for Strangford, who, during my time as a Minister, really was very proactive, very constructive in this area, and I had many very good meetings with him to discuss specific issues, lessons that we could learn from Northern Ireland and sharing best practice. In effect, there are two issues that have been raised, PIP and ESA. I would gently remind SNP members that they could take responsibility for, certainly for PIP. We, during my time as a Minister, had a very good relationship with my equivalent in the Scottish Assembly, and he was aware that it was ready as and when they were ready to take on that responsibility. 1.8 million people have already gone through the PIP process. It is considerably better than the old DLA system, and that is widely accepted by the vast majority of the charities who represent their members who've gone through the system. Under DLA, only 16% of claimants got the highest rate of the benefit. Under PIP, it is 23.5%. It is far better at identifying hidden impairments, fluctuating health conditions. For example, if we look at mental health conditions, and this has been highlighted in the two former speeches, under DLA, only 22% of those who had a mental health condition accessed the daily living component, yet under PIP it's 66%, and for the higher rate of mobility, it was 9% under DLA, and it's 24% under PIP. It is a far better, more streamlined system. The assessors are there to help people fill in the forms. The fundamental problem with DLA was it was in effect self-diagnosis. You would fill in a very, very long, very complicated form. A lot of people would do themselves an injustice and not actually highlight all of the issues that they faced, often because they took them for granted. You know, I can't sleep at night. It's just the way it is. And they didn't actually then highlight that in their forms. The forms were complicated, so they would not necessarily know the right bits to put down. And even worse, 70% of claimants on DLA had an indefinite award. Now, it's very attractive for MPs to say, well, we don't want anybody to ever go through an assessment. But the reality was, under DLA, 70% didn't. That sounds great. Yet 1 in 3 claimants' condition changes so significantly within 12 months, they should be on a different benefit. Now, the vast majority of people who go through the system have a deteriorating condition. So if their condition has changed, it's probably changed for the worse, and it is highly likely they would therefore go from the lower rate of benefit to the higher rate of benefit. And that was the single biggest difference to why it was only 16% under DLA got the highest rate, and it's 23.5% under PIP. We had people for 10, 20, longer years on a benefit below what they should have been entitled to, and they were unaware that they could have had an opportunity to go up. And it is right, therefore, that we look and assess people to make sure they are given the correct benefit that they should have. Now, common sense kicks in. If you are on the highest rate of benefit, you have a deteriorating condition, so unless there is some miracle cure, you are likely only to be reassessed at the end of the 10-year period, and then it would probably be very light touch. In effect, phoning up, has it been a miracle cure? No. Can you provide the GP's evidence to say it hasn't been a miracle? That's fine. You will go through. It is those who are on the cusp of going from the lower benefit to the higher benefit who can see having another assessment to check, and the system would actually program in to say this person nearly made to the highest rate of benefit. I suspect they will need it in 9 months' time, and the system will automatically trigger to remind them that there is a reassessment so they're not left languishing on those debts. So I urge members to be careful in trying to stop people having an opportunity to have an assessment. Now, in cash terms, DLA in 2010 delivered £12.7 billion worth of benefit support. The combined DLA and PIP is now at £16.6 billion. The time for assessment, when it was first launched, it was terrible. And we had lots and lots of debates in here. I wasn't the minister then, but I was warned when I first came into the role that we would have almost weekly debates. Some people were taking up to a year. That was unacceptable. But for now, nearly 18 months, it's been in a settled state, about 7 weeks for an assessment, 13 weeks end-to-end for the whole process, well below the initial target of about 16 weeks. And again, the charities and those with a huge amount of experience accept the system is working well. The forms have been streamlined. They are still longer than perhaps we would like, but it's always a balancing act that if you don't capture all of the information, people can then miss out on the benefit they will. And I repeat, the assessors are there to help the claimant. The government sets how much money and the points that are required, but the assessors are in effect there to make sure that the form is completed. And I've sat through assessments. I've seen two different extremes. I saw an assessment where it was a practising nurse, and she came in, and the assessment was super quick. They used lots of very long words that I had no understanding of, and they were able to breeze through there. The other end of the extreme was seeing an individual who English wasn't his first language. He had a mental health condition, was socially isolated, and in effect, if he had self-diagnosed under DLA, he wouldn't have qualified. But actually, the assessor spent 1 hour, 10 minutes, in effect, teasing out, piecing together the jigsaw to make sure that all of the challenges that he faced in his everyday life would be accurately reflected, and he would have ended up getting a higher benefit than he would under DLA. And for those who criticise the assessments, I urge you to go and view one. That can be arranged, and you will have your eyes opened up, because too many people claim their knowledge based on a film that is there to make commercial money rather than the real world. And it is frankly an insult to the huge amounts of hard work that a lot of these trained professionals are doing to help some of the most vulnerable people. And the facts are there comparing DLA to PIP. With pleasure.
I just wondered if you wanted to comment on, rather than the film, which again was based on individuals that represent the dramatic portrayal, but if you wanted to comment on the Dispatches programme as well, which wasn't a fictional portrayal, it was an actual portrayal of the assessment process that people go through.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm not long. I'm glad the Honourable Member has intervened me, because I had a feeling she wouldn't let me intervene her later on, so I could now link that in nicely. Yes, the Dispatches programme showed an isolated incident that was totally unacceptable. The individual was moved, rightly so, and that is why we have external inspectors going into there. Remember, this is 1.8 million people, and I would urge the Honourable Member to take up my invitation to go and view an assessment. Hearsay is not the right way to kind of hold governments to account. This is so important to people that people with positions of responsibility need to invest some time to go and see what actually is happening. It's not patronising, it's an important subject. There has been further improvements. The removal of the 28-day rule for terminally ill people. This was a cross-party campaign. It has made a huge difference to those who are terminally ill. It was a welcome measurement. There is ongoing training. I would like to see automatic recordings of all assessments, because I think that would be helpful on the appeals process. That needs a change in the contract, but my understanding is the intention is to do that. And also, it is right that the assessors now encourage people to bring somebody with them into the assessment, particularly helpful for people who aren't necessarily articulate or English isn't their first language, or wouldn't have the confidence to display all of those challenges. I also think it's a fair point to say, and it was raised by the Honourable Member for Lanark, about the ESA and the PIP assessments are not a million miles too different, and too often I've heard of the cases where they've done one month, one the other month. There probably is some grounds, and I think in the Green Paper that is something that perhaps many organisations will lobby for, that there could at least be some serious data sharing going on there. And in conclusion, Ms Norris, because I have focused on PIP, just briefly on ESA, the Green Paper is a wonderful opportunity. As Scope, the charity, said, disabled people need expert, tailored employment support. We need to focus on what individuals can do and what they can't do, rather than what they can't do. It's important to provide tailored support, recognising people have fluctuating health conditions, utilising the best parts of the universal credit system that will allow for flexibility, that will allow for some common sense, particularly where it's voluntary work, building confidence to get people back into work, providing that ongoing support when people go into work for the first time, and having that specific named coach. And I will continue to pitch, as a matter of importance, the small employer pilot, I believe, is so successful that it should be rolled out across the rest of the country as quickly as possible, and we need to unleash the opportunity of disability apprentices. Everybody agrees it's a great thing. We've signed it off. We now just need to see that making a real difference, particularly for those with a learning disability.
Lord McDonough.
Thank you, Mr. Ms Dorries. Can I start by thanking the member for Lanark and Hamilton East for securing this important debate? I would like to focus on some of the logistical issues around PIP that could be improved at a local level, drawing on the experience of the excellent Merton Centre for Independent Living in my constituency. Merton Sill is a user-led disabled people's organisation which delivers a range of services to disabled people across Merton. Their practical experience and casework of its members has brought together a range of issues regarding both ESA and PIP, which demonstrates that disabled people are facing significant and unfair disadvantage when accessing the benefits they are rightfully entitled to. Disabled people have been disproportionately hit by welfare reform, with the cumulative cuts to benefits and social care affecting them on average 19 times more than non-disabled people. Merton Sill's experience has shown that PIP assessment centres are amazingly inaccessible. Some of my constituents in Mitcham and Morden in South West London have been asked to travel as far as Deptford and East London to get to their assessment centres, journeys of about 2 hours each way, which is unacceptably difficult for many disabled people, many who pass their local centres en route to get to faraway destinations. But even the local centres in Wandsworth and Croydon are difficult to get to because many lack transport links, which is quite difficult in South West London. Some of the centres, unbelievably, have no disabled parking, and others are not accessible for wheelchair users. Most have cramped and unpleasant waiting areas. All of this just demonstrates a lack of consideration and thought into practicalities. It is imperative before all PIP assessment centres should have an audit of accessibility and should be fit for purpose for use by disabled attendees. Research has also shown that the practice of overbooking appointments for assessment centres is commonplace. This is made on the assumption that some people will not turn up, but causes great distress and inconvenience to those who do. Shockingly, an assessor told Merton Sill that she had 20 assessments on her list per shift, but that she could only expect to do 6 in the time available. Many of my constituents have had to wait hours to be seen, or have had their appointments suddenly cancelled less than an hour beforehand. Many disabled people need to wait a substantial length of time to even get an appointment, and then have to be kept waiting for hours on end, or have at the last minute cancellation after weeks of preparation, after getting somebody to provide the transport and attend the appointment, is completely unacceptable. Finally, and perhaps most worryingly of all, inaccurate assessments of both PIP and ESA are widespread, making the wrong decisions and causing a lot of pain to individuals who are entitled to benefits. PIP works on a point system, and Merton Sill has witnessed many assessments where people are being assessed as having 0 or very few points, results which are later overturned on tribunal. For some of my constituents, their assessments were so far removed from their lived experience that they felt sure that their notes had been mixed up with someone else's. Some of the disabled residents I have spoken to say that they have been felt very intimidated by aggressive assessors. Meanwhile, Merton Sill advocates who have attended appointments with residents have sometimes been stopped from asking questions or taking notes in direct contravention of DWP guidelines. It is crucial that this is addressed at a local level by providers working with individual centres and staff. There are also a range of other ESA-related problems, such as the practice of arranging unnecessarily frequent repeat assessments, and the unfair and sudden stopping of ESA payments, and the difficulty of successfully contacting the DWP to correct issues. We all know of the terrible pain and hardship that comes with the appeals process, and this cannot be acceptable that 2/3 of people applying for PIP and ESA are being forced to undergo a lengthy appeal process in order to assess a benefit to which they are entitled to in the first place. I hope that the Minister may address some of the basic practical issues about the administrative process and access to assessment centres. in order to ensure that every centre is reasonably accessed by public transport, has disabled parking, and that people can expect to be seen when they are given their appointment. I am sorry that I will be unable to be here for the Minister's conclusions, but I do wish these very practical issues to be addressed.
Mr Neil, oh no, sorry. Madeline Moon's not here. Corrie Wilson?
Chair, and I'd like to thank my honourable friend for securing this important debate. I was recently contacted by a constituent after his DLA was stopped when he failed to attend an assessment that he knew nothing about. A missing letter resulted in not only the loss of more than £400 a month in DLA payments, but because he was no longer in receipt of DLA, he had had more than £30 a week in severe disability payments taken off his ESA. And if that wasn't enough, he had his +1 bus pass taken away. Now, this gentleman suffers from severe mental health issues, including dementia, depression and anxiety, and he also has a heart condition that needs regular monitoring. But because of a lack of funds and the bus pass being taken away, over the past few months, that has meant that he has now missed at least 3 health appointments. His dementia means he has memory problems, obviously, and because he can no longer in receipt of DLA, he has now lost his carer and is solely responsible for his own medication. When he asked about all these changes, he was told that he didn't have a good enough reason for missing his appointment. The decision to remove his DLA will stand, and that his failure to attend the assessment means he's not eligible for PIP. His appeal will not be decided until the new year. Now, while my office is looking into ways of helping this particular man, the fact remains that the Department of Work and Pensions, and by extension this government, thinks it's perfectly acceptable to leave a man with dementia and a life-threatening heart condition with zero support for more than 4 months. Just because he missed one appointment, which he had no memory of being notified about, sadly, though, he is not alone. The government's ongoing transition from DLA to PIP means that thousands of disabled people are losing out, and according to DWP statistics, more than 46,800 claimants in Scotland that have been reassessed from DLA to PIP, only 77% were successfully awarded. Now, almost 11,000 people lost their award, and 11,000 people were left at the mercy of the system. So despite the rosy picture painted opposite, this system is seriously failing these people. And as we've heard today, I'm not the only MP having a large number of constituents coming forward who have lost their access to higher rate mobility component. Taking away a person's mobility vehicle makes it significantly harder for them to sustain employment or education. It reduces their options, increases their dependency on family members and adds to social isolation. As my honourable friends already mentioned, the latest statistics on appeals against PIP decisions show that a staggering 65% of appeals are found in favour of the claimant. Coupled with almost 60% of initial decisions in ESA assessments being overturned, a reasonable person would be left wondering about the cost-effectiveness of a system that routinely makes such bad decisions. When you add in the recent UN report that describes austerity policies of this government as amounting to systematic violation of the rights of disabled people, it's clearly a system deeply flawed. The government's Green Paper on disability employment support is a critical opportunity to get the system right for sick and disabled people, but one cannot help but be sceptical when they insist on pressing ahead with cuts to ESA RAG. The government have claimed this will incentivise disabled people into work, despite there being no actual evidence to support this. The real barriers to returning to employment, such as ill health, attitudes of employers, skills barriers and reasonable adjustments, and the ability of suitable jobs, are not addressed by cuts in financial support. In fact, creating additional financial pressures can actually make people less likely to return to the labour market, as the added stress damages their already fragile health. By carrying out cuts to ESA RAG Group, the government is sending a clear signal that it does not recognise the additional barriers faced by these currently unable to seek work. Often people with the most complex needs have higher costs related to work activities, as they need to spend money on transport, communication support to go to interviews, attend training courses and get work experience. The cuts to ESA RAG will only further penalise people who are already struggling and will not address these additional issues. Cuts to ESA should, as a minimum, be delayed until the provision suggested in the Green Paper is tested and shown to actually support disabled people into employment, including people with complex needs. Some 15% of the UK benefit system is being devolved to Scotland, and I am pleased that the Scottish Government are committed to ensuring that the mistakes the UK Government have made with PIP and assessments are not repeated. The priority is the safe and secure transfer of social security powers to Scotland to ensure that everyone who relies on these benefits will receive them at the right time and the right amount. Nobody should fall through the gaps, and everybody should be treated with respect and dignity. That's the social security system that I would like to see. But in current form, I think it's unlikely that this is the system that will be seen in the 85% of the system still reserved here at Westminster.
Mr Gibson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I wish to offer my thanks and congratulations to my honourable friend from Lanark and Hamilton East for bringing this debate forward. Madam Chair, I am delighted to participate in this debate, but I really wish it wasn't necessary. My contribution I did intend that it should be brief, but I'm afraid that my efforts to help the member for North Swindon necessarily make it a wee bit longer than I had thought it would be. I wish that the austerity agenda, a political choice, did not fall so heavily on the shoulders of those living with disabilities. I wish that the UK Government would put an end to this revolving door, this revolving culture of work capability assessments for those seeking to claim personal independence payments, although we all welcome, I think, that this merry-go-round of reassessments for those with chronic conditions at least will be removed. I wish that those who find themselves grappling with a health condition or disability which limits their ability to work, indeed their ability to live as full a life as they would wish, did not feel as though they were being punished for it. And I wish that those claiming personal independence payments or seeking to claim this benefit, which is gradually replacing disability living allowance, were not confronted with such a flawed system, a system in need of radical reform. I will indeed.
The honourable member will welcome the fact that an extra £3 billion is being spent now supporting those on DLA and PIP compared to just DLA in 2010, and the fact that it's now 23.5% or on the highest rate compared to just 16% of DLA. This is good news.
I think the honourable gentleman would perhaps do well to remember the fact, according to OBR figures, that whilst more money is being spent, this is down to, according to the OBR, not to myself, this is down to the fact that demand has increased. So we should treat those figures, I think, with a bit more caution. The fact that the system is flawed is demonstrated by the fact that 65% of appeal decisions found in favour of claimants, which means that this 65% initially had their applications turned down, causing untold stress, anxiety about how they would cope in the future. The honourable gentleman from North Swindon spoke of work capability assessments as an opportunity. Well, I'm afraid that my constituents in North Ayrshire and Arran did not see this process as an opportunity. Perhaps the constituents in North Swindon found it so, but certainly in my part of the world that was not the case. Once again,
just to be very clear, I said about PIP assessments being an opportunity, not work capability assessments. That's for ESA. That needs to be reformed.
We're surrounded by such a wealth of opportunity, it's hard to keep up. None of the system that my constituents experience is seen as an opportunity. It's seen as extremely negative, intimidating and humiliating. And also the honourable gentleman talked about, when he talks about these assessments, or what was mentioned earlier, you really would think, and perhaps I misunderstood him, but I would suggest that if I've misunderstood you, then I certainly will not be alone. You would think that these assessments always resulted in somebody's entitlement, somebody's benefit being increased, and I can assure him that in my constituency that is almost never the case. Now, I know the honourable gentleman, perhaps in the interest of trying to be helpful to the Chamber today, talked about how we should go and see an assessment taking place. I have to tell the honourable gentleman, and perhaps this is just me, but I haven't done a survey or anything, but I have to say that these assessments are not a spectator sport. These are people's lives, and the people who go through them very, very often find them humiliating and very damaging. And I can tell the honourable gentleman that if I were to go through one of these assessments, the last thing I would want is an audience. Perhaps I may want a member of my family or a close friend, but I certainly wouldn't want my MP, who in effect would usually be a stranger, even though they might be a well-known name to me. I certainly wouldn't want this to turn into a spectator sport. So I think we have to be very careful of MPs filling the galleys when people are having their lives exposed and deconstructed by strangers themselves to the applicant. This really is a debate about social justice, and employment support allowance is a form of financial support for those with life-limiting conditions, and therefore their ability to work, their ability to live a fully satisfying life, which we would all hope we would have access to, is effectively removed. And I think we have to remember that when we have these debates and when we have these discussions, and indeed when we have these assessments taking place. I know the honourable gentleman has informed the Chamber today that the assessors are there to help, and I am quite sure that the assessors think that that is the case as well. But claimants feel stressed. They are confronted by assessors who are, by definition, strangers, who have little or no knowledge of their particular condition. And we've all heard stories, and Parkinson's UK could keep you going all day if you haven't heard these stories. But we've all heard stories of people, for example, with conditions like Parkinson's, in the past being asked by their work capability assessor, how long are you likely to have Parkinson's for? We know that the criteria for work capability assessment is flawed, and we know that in particular those with fluctuating conditions are always at risk of being assessed on what might be called, strangely, a good day, because it's all relative. But this is not taken into account by the work capability assessment, and nor is the impact of pain and fatigue, or indeed some of the conditions, such as Parkinson's, which are degenerative. And as a result, too many employment support allowance applicants are placed on the work-related activity group, instead of the much more appropriate support group, which recognises that the claimant is simply not well enough to work. And I know, and I just want to reassure the honourable gentleman, I know that the government has reversed the need for repeated work capability assessments for the chronically ill, and this is welcome, but it simply does not go far enough. It really is a matter of great concern to all fair-minded people that from April 2017, people placed in the employment support work-related activity group will receive £30 per week less than someone in the same situation today. And for this reason, this failure of the system is even more alarming. Flawed criteria are a particular difficulty for people with conditions such as Parkinson's, although there's a whole range of conditions I could mention, but time forbids it. So flawed criteria creates a particular difficulty for people with Parkinson's in receipt of disability living allowance when being assessed for PIP. Under DLA, if a person could walk no more than 50 metres, they were eligible for support. For PIP, this distance has arbitrarily, randomly it seems, reduced to 20 metres. And this is such a short distance that it's not a useful or a helpful estimate of a person's mobility. And given the fluctuating nature of some conditions and the failure of the process to register this fluctuation, many people are losing their mobility vehicles upon which they heavily rely. And I think the member for North Swindon really would be very interested to know that recent investigations have found that under DLA, 82% of people with Parkinson's receive the full mobility payment, whereas under PIP, that has dropped to 40%. That is a massive drop. And these people are losing their vehicles within 28 days of an assessment decision being taken against them. I don't see how anybody could come to this chamber and say that that's acceptable, because what is happening is that these people are being isolated in their own homes. They're being effectively punished for their illness, and their dependency on family members increases.
9 minutes, please.
Okay. I just want to... I'm being pressed by the Chair to conclude my remarks. Everybody welcomes the government's green paper. What we don't welcome is the headlong rush into cuts before this can be properly analysed and used to help us get this system correct. We need an evidence-based and compassionate approach, and quite frankly, Madam Chair, I don't see that. We should all want the same thing. We should all want to support people with disabilities into work and support those who cannot work. We need to make sure we're doing it properly. And I urge the Minister to reflect on that and all that's been suggested here today.
Ms McGarry, you didn't put in to speak. We haven't got notification, but I could call you for a few minutes if you could conclude, say, just 3-4 minutes very quickly. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ms Dory. It's an oversight. I'll have to take that up. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak in the debate, and obviously thank you to the Honourable Member for Lanark and Hamilton East for securing the debate. She made an excellent speech which well articulated both her constituents' case but also opened the debate in a really good style with lots of information. 2 weeks ago, Honourable and Right Honourable members debated and discussed punitive welfare reforms of the government, specifically cuts to the ESA RAG in the House of Commons at length on 2 occasions. 127 MPs laid down a marker and said the government must pause, reflect and reconsider the cuts to the ESA RAG. And when the government didn't oppose the motion, some would be forgiven for thinking that was a sign that they were listening to our concerns. But it feels like we're having these debates week in and week out. But if we have to keep bringing them back to the Chamber, to the House, we will. The time for conciliatory debate, which doesn't powerfully challenge the government, is over, and it is right for people and constituents and members to be angry, especially when there is absolutely no evidence that cutting ESA RAG incentivises people into work. Just like people in Glasgow East and across Scotland and throughout the UK listening to the Prime Minister on the steps of Downing Street, she promised to fight for injustice. She pledged to lead the government for the many, not the few. But by the time the Chancellor stepped away from the dispatch box on Wednesday, our benefit of the doubt had evaporated. Indeed, it's sometimes more telling, in fact more damning, when someone doesn't say something than when they do. The Chancellor of the Exchequer spoke at length, 692 words, but failed to mention ESA once. The Chancellor could even find the time and words to ask whether the Shadow Chancellor could dance, but no words could be found for disabled people or ESA. Since the government announced its punishment cuts, MPs of all colours and all stripes have railed against it. It's so important. That's why it keeps coming back to the Chamber, and the Minister is constantly called back to answer. And I appreciate that she is here in Westminster Hall to do that today. But it seems that the case is devoid of logic and compassion, because reducing ESA to the rate of job seekers' allowance is wrong for a number of reasons. People on ESA are already assessed as being unfit for work, whereas people on job seekers are able to actively seek work. Therefore, it's unsurprising that ESA recipients need more support for longer than GSA. Indeed, more than half of ESA RAG recipients are on the welfare support for more than 2 years. Secondly, and I will draw to a conclusion, interlinked to the length of time is a higher associated cost to a person for their illness and disability. And finally, it's absolutely extraordinary, perverse, it is callous to expect those suffering illness and disability to suffer on £73 for such a prolonged period of time as 2 years. And I think the Honourable Member for Strangford made that point very forcefully, that why would somebody on a job at £500 per week want to go down to £73 a week if they could help it? I cannot, nor will I ever understand how any elected representative, how any government can propose to support proposals that serve no other purpose than to pick the pockets of the sick and disabled and put them through the trauma of a broken and unfair assessment PIP or ESA assessment. Where is the humanity in it? I too look forward to seeing the Green Paper. But I have to say, until we have seen that, it is time for the government to rethink the assessments and also to pause the cuts to ESA RAG. Thank you.
Neil Gray.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to take part in this debate with you in the Chair. And I wish to start my contribution by paying tribute to my honourable friend from Lanark and Hamilton East for securing the debate and the ways that she set out her case, highlighting that these are pressing issues on all of our postbags, and also that the raising the very concerning case of our constituent, the experiences of our constituent Donna. And the assessment notes that my honourable friend read out actually struck with me that they mirrored very closely a constituency case that I'm currently dealing with, where a gentleman suffered mental health problems, had previously been in work, fell out of work because of them, was assessed for support, for social security support, and failed. Some of the notes from those assessments were very, very similar, and sadly, he went on to commit suicide. So it's very concerning. It's harrowing cases that we have heard today. I also wish to note the contributions of others that have spoken in this debate today. The honourable member for Strangford, quite rightly, again suggesting why on earth would someone who previously earned £500 a week choose then to receive £73 or £75 a week. It's not a choice anyone would make. But also highlighted the apparent dichotomy that's at play there, whereby the government is saying to his constituent that they're unable to employ them, while expecting employers to employ people of similar concern. So something that I hope the Minister will reflect on. I also wish to pick up on the former Minister, the Honourable Member for North Swindon. I listened carefully to his contribution, which I always do. He gave a very stout defence of his government and of his record in government as well. But one thing I would wish to do, and I attempt to be, as I always am, as constructive and as consensual as I can be, that what we've heard today and what we've heard in previous debates are personal testimonies from constituents. It's not just hearsay. And I don't know if that was a slip of the tongue from the former Minister, but certainly the experiences of the constituents highlighted today, that doesn't mirror. It's not just hearsay. The Honourable Member for Mitcham and Mordam rightly highlighted the disproportionate impact that welfare cuts are having on those with disabilities compared to those without disabilities, 9 times more for those with a disability. And it appears to fly in the face of the commitment by David Cameron, the previous Prime Minister, that he would protect those with a disability in the social security system. My honourable friend, the member for Ayr, Carrick and Cumnock, who I welcome to our place as the SNP's new disability spokesperson, highlighted another constituency case which is very troubling and which I hope the Minister will have taken heed of and which she will commit to look into. And the Honourable Member for Ayrshire and Arran, my honourable friend, the Member for Ayrshire and Arran, that she's absolutely right. This debate is centrally about social justice, but also rightly highlighted the indignity that is felt by our constituents going through these processes, and how, if the government's to get it right, it needs to look at the way that people feel that they are being treated. Whether the government agrees that that's the case is irrelevant. It's what the people that are experiencing the system feel that is important, and that is quite clearly different from what the government feels it is at the moment. And the Honourable Member for Glasgow East rightly said we are not going away on this issue on regards to ESA RAG, and that's what I'm going to focus the majority of my time on. Speaking about right now, because it is a further opportunity to quiz the Minister on her plans, specifically on ESA RAG. And on the 17th of November, we had a backbench business debate on the motion I brought to the House with the support of 8 other parties in Parliament, a motion which was carried by Parliament. And the Minister for Health and Work then took an intervention from the Honourable Member for Enfield Southgate, who supported the motion. He pressed the Minister on some potential financial mechanisms whereby new claimants for ESA RAG may be, and I quote, fully compensated for the loss of RAG payments. And she said yes. Let me give my honourable friend that reassurance. Now, perhaps my assessment of what fully compensated means is different to what the Minister interprets it should be. But my reading of what she had to say was that new ESA RAG claimants would be getting equivalent financial support through hardship funds or flexible support funds or third-party deals outlined by the member for Enfield Southgate. And I tested that in a written question but not get a clear reply. So I hope today the Minister might take the opportunity to say today what she meant by fully compensated. And in the autumn statement, the Chancellor appeared to undermine her apparent pledge, saying in response to the Shadow Chancellor that the savings from the ESA RAG cut would now be £330 million invested in a package of support as opposed to direct financial help. Presumably he meant the Green Paper package, which is currently being consulted on and which was previously budgeted to be £60 million next year. So, forgive me, Madam Chair, but this appears to be as clear as mud to me and many, many others looking on to try to understand what the government is going to do, how much it's going to commit, and the mechanism by which it will be implemented. The only thing the government has been clear about is that it wants to cut ESA RAG without saying what is coming to replace that. And they've really put the cart in front of the horse. And I understand that fresh ministers now are perhaps flogging that horse to catch up. But the plans for having the disability employment gap appear to be falling away. We don't know if that's still a commitment. And the system to replace the work programme and cuts to ESA RAG should have been consulted on first. This is a point that's been made across the House, the Chamber today. It's been made repeatedly across the House in previous debates. It's gone the wrong way round. And it is a bit like the government announcing that they're going to scrap the TV licence in April, but only just now going through the process of deciding how that should be replaced, with no guarantee to the BBC how much financial support it would receive. In fact, it is probably going to receive about a third of public funds, but will get practical support in order to generate better outcomes. It just doesn't wash. It may be a policy which would appease some people, but it's clearly not the way to treat anyone. It has no evidence of being any fairer or delivering better outcomes because we have no idea how the system is going to work. And just to critique what appears to be the main motive behind this, that someone getting an extra £29 a week on top of job seeker allowance is a disincentive to work, here's what my constituent Janice had to say when she got in touch with me this week ahead of the debate. I quote from her, that being unemployed and reliant on benefits is demeaning and depressing. Employers need to focus on what people can do rather than what they can't. There are always ways to work around. Many can work from home with flexible hours and would jump at that opportunity. Now, does Janice strike the Minister as someone who chooses or wants to be out of work? Of course not. She is like hundreds of thousands of sick and disabled people up and down this land who desperately want to work. Cutting their money or cutting what they could receive doesn't change their minds or incentivise them any more than what already motivates them, and that is dignity and self-worth, and about getting a job that they can sustain. And what cutting that vital support away will do is add an additional layer of stress and worry and hinder their ability with additional work search costs to find the work that they so desperately crave. The MS Society points to research published last year by Scope's Extra Costs Commission, which says neurological conditions such as MS can cost an extra £200 a week for people to live with. So I look forward and I plead and I hope for the Minister to seeing what the Minister and her government plans to do to help people by providing additional employment support, but also financial support. She must realise and accept that people who are in ESA RAG are there because they are currently unfit for work. They have an illness or a disability which means they cannot currently work. Often, ESA RAG is their only income, and yet somehow from April, people on ESA RAG, people who are sick or disabled, are going to be expected to sustain themselves on the same rate as job seekers' allowance. The government must think again.
Yes. And it's lovely to serve under your chairmanship again. And congratulations as well to the member for Lanark and the Hamilton East on an excellent debate. I think this has been really, really constructive in terms of providing more cases to the Minister and the former Minister, how people are experiencing the cuts that they are going through, how they are experiencing the assessment processes as sick and disabled people, and the indignity that too often they face. I do wish Donna all the very best, and I hope that she continues to recover. And I think it is the personal stories that, as I say, bring this to life. Thank you to everyone that has contributed so well today. I should have started to say Happy St Andrew's Day. I forgot, but hopefully that can be inserted appropriately. But I think it is, as I say, so important to understand and put the human faces of what, as I say, people are going through. To the former minister, I will say just this. I mean, he said, "Oh, do go and observe one of these events." Well, he's absolutely right. That's something that we should all try and do. But I'm sure he is aware of observational bias, and that we shouldn't take just observing as the only form of evidence. And we are hearing, seeing up and down the country the examples of what, as I say, sick and disabled people are going through every day. Mr. Rose, this is the first opportunity I've had to discuss this with the Minister, and I particularly want to focus today, as the Honourable Gentleman just did. I'm sorry, your constituency suddenly escapes me. Thank you very much. We're not going to go away. This issue is not going to go away. We will continue to campaign on this because it is a real injustice. £1,500 a year to the most vulnerable, the most poor of the poor, 5 million people. I'm not going to continually repeat the statistics that we repeated in the two debates just 2 weeks ago. What is so disappointing is that, for all the evidence from the UN committees that are investigating human rights concerns, that are investigating breaches in the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, our own Equality and Human Rights Commission, the government's own Social Security Advisory Committee, as well as charities, really well-respected charities such as Parkinson's, such as Scopa, and so on. We could go through a whole list. But even the government's own backbench is completely ignored, and we heard about the backbench business debates. The motion was carried without contest. That's almost unprecedented. The strength of the feeling of this House has been heard, and yet what was so absent in the autumn statement was anything that sick and disabled people could grasp about how their lives would be made better. It's been made a misery over the last 6 years, and is going to get worse. Now, I know that the Minister is new in her post, and she has said some very positive things. But we've heard as well from the Prime Minister very warm words. But when it has come to actually doing anything about it, the government has put their hands in their pockets and turned away. And we cannot have this. It needs to change. The government, has put forward arguments around incentivising claimants, that this is a way of, cuts will actually incentivise people into work, which is quite disgraceful, really. It's then inferring that people are making a choice. As we've had, people are not making a choice to live on £70-odd a week when they've had decent livings. This is something that they don't choose to do. But we have an obligation, as the 5th richest country in the world, to treat people with dignity and respect. It is about choices. I just want to pick up on the point that, again, other members have made around how people, what other funds that they could, discretionary funds that they might be able to draw on. And I was going through the Minister's speech last night, and the Flexible Support Fund was mentioned. And we need to understand about that fund. First of all, it's been investigated recently for fraud. The former Secretary of State tried to claim that it was being supplemented by £15 million a year to cover the costs. That's not the case. It's actually £15 million from 2015. It doesn't go anywhere near to matching the loss that people will be experiencing and the in-year deductions that will be made as a result of this cut. I just want to finish, Ms. Doris, if that's okay, on a point that that was raised in my constituency. We all had these hundreds of different cases. My case load has gone up exponentially as the people are being subjected to these increased cuts. And I want to talk about John Rowan, who's got a brain tumour, and as a consequence of that, he has 3 to 4 epileptic fits a week. And I was contacted by his surgeon because he was refusing to have a life-saving operation because he failed his work capability assessment. How somebody could fail that? This is a life-threatening condition. He'd failed his work capability assessment, and he was worried that he was going to be sanctioned, just in the same way that we saw in I. Daniel Blake. It's taken us months. He had no means of support. It's taken us months to sort this out. He now has finally had his ESA reinstated, but he was scared of being sanctioned because of that. And the stress that he was placed, as well as the indignity, it just is not right. That's one case. I could give loads others. We can't ignore work capability assessment within the context of ESA. There's something, again, that the Select Committee over 2 years ago raised, and I'm just quoting from the report, simply rebranding the work capability assessment by taking on a new provider will not solve the problems. A fundamental redesign of the ESA end-to-end process is required. Very briefly, if I could mention one of my constituents, a young woman who's going through the PIP process, was on a high-flying career. She's only in her 30s. She is experiencing lipedema, DACOMS, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, pain in every part of her body, but particularly in her hands. She can't even cook and prepare her own food. And she's gone through a PIP process, and she feels it's just like a slap in the face. She needs that support to enable her to recover, and she feels that she is being thwarted at every turn. Ms. Dawes, this is about choices. It's about choices about what we do, whether we feel that it is right as a country to support our most vulnerable people or those on the top incomes, which the autumn statement analysis shows that we did. We, on this side of the House, choose that we should be protecting and supporting our most vulnerable in society. It is about choice, and I hope the government will listen and will do something about that.
Well, I congratulate the Honourable Member for Lanark and Hamilton East on securing this debate, and all honourable members who have contributed to it. These are important services, and they are at the heart of our nation's values and its interests. Of the 2.5 million people claiming incapacity benefits, 1.3 million also claim PIP or DLA. A further million claim PIP or DLA, but not those incapacity benefits. And many of these people will also be accessing other support and state services, as well as support provided by partner organisations. What we do is vital, not only to enable someone to meet their living costs and endure, but also to support their ambitions. We have that dual responsibility. And in addition to that, I am very conscious, because of the combined areas that I look after, that I have the largest budget of any minister in any government department. That is a huge responsibility to the general public who fund it, and to those who these services are designed to help. And it is a responsibility I take very seriously indeed. PIP and ESA are entirely different benefits, designed for different purposes, and each has its own legal criteria. ESA provides support to those that face barriers to work and looks at what work a person can do rather than focusing on what they cannot. Unlike ESA, PIP is non-means tested and available to disabled people regardless of their employment status. PIP provides a contribution towards the extra personal costs due to their disability or health condition and can be paid on top of other benefits. The PIP assessment is designed to treat all health conditions and impairments fairly, and the assessment criteria takes into account the impact of all impairments, including mental health, on an individual's ability to carry out a broad range of everyday activities. And I think that that breadth is one of the benefits of this new system in comparison to what went before. And I thank the Honourable Member for North Swindon, who has outlined some other improvements the system makes. But the title of this debate, although it is about two benefits, understandably much of its content has focused on people, and quite rightly so, as the Honourable Member for Airdrie and Shotts has said. And in developing our policy and delivering our services, we need to remember that it's not just those people featured in today's debate, but those who have not been featured and also rarely get a mention. Those not on benefits, not yet in crisis, but financially fragile, those in ill health, those with multiple caring responsibilities who do not qualify for carers allowance, and those who, despite hardship, do not access benefit support available to them for a variety of reasons. Our concern and our support should stretch beyond the reach of our benefits. And what we must take from the Green Paper and take forward from it, and in all that we do in the interim, must also have help for those people in mind too. Both ESA and PIP are massive systems, and rightly both have and will continue to undergo continual improvements. Contrary to what the Honourable Lady opposite says, we've had many changes, and recent changes include, for ESA, the announcement that we will stop reassessments for those with severe health conditions and disabilities. And in designing this, I have asked that we plan ahead and see in the future if we have permission to share information with local government, we could do so to enable them also to stop requiring those very same people to fill in forms for locally administered schemes. And the Honourable Member for Strangford, in his speech, outlined some of the potential benefits of doing that when he mentioned social care and other services. In ESA, we now have clinical data to hold contractors to account, and I would pay tribute to DWP's Chief Medical Officer and her team for the work they have done in this regard and what they are doing on data sharing. And we have trialled being more flexible with the time given to early stages of an application process to ensure all the health information is available to the assessor. And that is the best way to cut down on incorrect decisions being made at that early stage. I'll just make some progress, if you forgive me. And we are rolling that out. The past-present test will no longer apply to claims of DLA, PIP and attendance allowance and carers allowance with regard to refugees and people with humanitarian protection status and their families. We're extending hardship payments, and the ESA appeals process has been reformed, with mandatory reconsideration clearance times down from 35 days to 9. Both the number of weeks and the percentage of caseload having to go to appeal to get the right decision is reducing. And I would say also that there have been huge strides made in identifying and training members of staff with regard to hidden impairments. The Honourable Lady, in whose name this debate stands, mentioned that she spoke at length about the factors of appearance. Well, many people might look absolutely perfectly together and presentable, but have deeply hidden issues, and we have done a huge amount in training staff to recognise that, and more is planned. The Secretary of State has announced his focus on the use of sanctions for those with mental health conditions, and the Green Paper gives us the possibility of major reform with different parts of the system in unison. In that consultation, we want to examine how we might simplify and improve the assessment process and how we can use information better to effectively support people, including our ability to share data with others to support organisations and other state services with, of course, claimant consent. And the reform of the work capability assessment, which we have not been able to do to date because I think it will require primary legislation. But in that, and it's a focus of the Green Paper, we could potentially separate out decisions on entitlement to employment support and entitlement to financial support. And questions, I'm just going to make a little progress because I have some announcements to make. The Green Paper also looks at statutory sick pay and other issues which would have benefited, if I've understood Donna's case and understood her situation, to enable that phased return to work, which is obviously what people need. And rather than having a person jump through continual hoops, we want that support wrapped round that individual, whatever situation they have been landed in. And not just that the support that they are given is exactly what they need when they need it, and personalised, whether it is delivered by a job centre, a GP practice nurse or another, but that their experience of the whole system is what they need when they needed it. Having to wait for an assessment to be carried out before you can have a conversation with someone about your situation and your hopes is not smart. And we need that joined-up common sense approach in all we do, that we don't just start thinking about what assistive technology or equipment someone might need when they hit the employment market, but when they are at school, college, and receiving careers advice. I'm just going to make some progress, just forgive me, that kind of quality can only be reached by stellar local working, which is why the Green Paper consultation is more than an information gathering exercise. It is a call to arms. We have to build those new commitments and shared outcomes locally, and I urge all members to help us in the consultation process and come along to the drop-in event on Monday between 3 and 5 p.m. in this House. Information related to your own constituency, how to run an event or get involved in one, and bringing partners together to respond to the consultation, but also think about what needs to be done in your local area. And during that process, we will continue to develop those networks facilitated by the Flexible Support Fund and myth bust about what local services we will commission to support those on benefits. I just want to briefly turn to Motability, which the honourable members for Ayr, Carrick and Cumnock and the honourable member for North Ayrshire particularly focused on. Honourable members will know that there has been a previous scheme set up. I'm very grateful for Motability for doing that, to try and help with the transition from DLA to PIP, which is a challenging time for individuals. That is a £175 million package that members will be familiar with regard to keeping their car for 7 weeks, being allowed to buy back their old vehicle, the one-off payment of £2,000 to help meet their continuing Motability needs, and Motability helping pay for new adaptations to non-scheme cars with insurance thrown in. We are aware of how difficult that situation is, despite that mitigation. And I have outlined, despite that mitigation and other sources of transport subsidy that might be available to someone. To be told that you will lose your vehicle with only a few weeks to make alternative arrangements. There are other problems too. I'll just outline one, which is a particular concern to me, which is about people that will be leaving the country for extended periods over 13 weeks. This is a problem for students, but it's also a problem for someone that might want to take up a career opportunity or a sabbatical or other opportunities which require travel. And our systems must be able to support someone following their dreams and ambitions to enable a person to thrive. So this situation should not be left to stand. We have been discussing with relevant departments ways to enable PIP claimants to keep their vehicle pending appeal, and are exploring potential options to allow those who are not in receipt of the higher Motability component to have access to the Motability scheme. I am also exploring how claimants who are out of the country for extended periods can be better supported. We have a plan and Treasury's blessing, and this week I have written to Motability to ask for their help to deliver it. I anticipate it will require some changes to their processes, but I know, as they have done in the past, they will do all they can to help us in this matter. It is a remarkable and unique partnership we have with Motability, and I hope in my tenure to maximise on that. I have spoken at length about the RAG group, and time is short, but I do just want to briefly say that we are looking at a range of measures to help ensure that someone's experience of these systems, and that is fundamentally the heart of what people has been discussing today, can be improved, and that we're aware of all those issues. This includes looking at developing service user panels, which we use to design our benefit systems, to create a real-time reporting mechanism of someone's experiences. And there are a raft of other measures which I don't have time to outline today, which will help us do that, and I will bring forward measures shortly. The final thing I would just say, before I hand over to the Honourable Lady whose debate this is to just reassure her that when devolution further transitions powers to Holyrood, I will be there to assist. I'm already talking to her colleagues there about how we can get the best outcome for the issues she mentions and others. And again, this comes down to all members of this House, whichever part of the country we represent, whatever political hue we are, working together to get the best outcome in these systems. And I hope that all members will come to the drop-in next Monday.
6 seconds.
Thank the Ms Stories for that. Can I thank all of the honourable members?